Dad's birthday. My sister's son dumped soda in my lap and yelled, "Grandpa says you don't belong here." The table laughed. I wiped my clothes, smiled, and stayed quiet. That night, I pulled my name from their loan. By morning, his car was gone. And at 8 a.m., there was a knock at my door. I opened it and saw, "My name is Rowan Adley, I'm 36. And if you think you know how this ends, stay tuned." How do you stay loyal to a family that cashes your silence like a check? They needed my credit. Badly. The loan was for a second property, my dad's retirement dream, or so they said. Except it was really for my sister's husband's failing landscaping business, which, by the way, didn't even have a website. Still, I signed, because blood is thicker than sense. Until that night. Until the soda, the laughter, my dad raising his glass and saying, "Kids speak the truth, huh?" Like humiliation was a joke he'd been waiting to tell. I sat there, soaked, tight-lipped. But inside, a switch flipped. I went home and logged into the bank's portal, removed myself from the co-signer list. They'd made one mistake on the paperwork, listed me as optional party, not primary. They thought I wouldn't notice. I did. By dawn, the loan had been flagged, frozen, reevaluated, and with that freeze came the repo man, because the down payment, that shiny new car they bought for the business, had been leveraged against the loan. And now, the loan was in limbo. So when the knock came at 8 a.m., I expected more begging. But it wasn't my sister. It was my brother-in-law. And his hands were shaking. He didn't say hello, just stood there in a wrinkled t-shirt, sweat on his neck, like he'd sprinted from guilt itself. "They took the car," he muttered. "First thing this morning. Just drove it off the driveway." I stepped aside without inviting him in. He walked past me anyway. "I need you to fix it, Rowan. Just call the bank. Say it was a misunderstanding." A misunderstanding? Was it a misunderstanding when my nephew humiliated me in front of 12 people? When my sister grinned over cake while I dabbed soda from my jeans? When my dad toasted to my exclusion like it was a birthday wish? I crossed my arms. "No." His head snapped toward me. "What?" "No," I repeated. "You dumped soda in my lap. Not literally, but close enough. And then you expected me to pay for dessert. You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm dead serious." He paced my kitchen, hands flailing. "My clients, my equipment, everything's in that truck. And none of that's my fault," I said, calm as glass. That's when he made the mistake. He leaned in, too close. "You think this won't come back on you? Your father already texted me." I cut in, reaching for my phone. Said, and I quote, "You've always been ungrateful." He blinked. I held up the screen. Then another message for my sister. "We'll remember this next holiday." "Good," I said. "Remember it." He stormed out, muttering threats that didn't scare me. But what came next did. An hour later, I got a notification. Someone had tried to access my credit file. Twice. From my parents' address. They weren't just angry. They were getting desperate. You said. The attempted credit access didn't surprise me. What surprised me was how fast they moved. I checked the timestamp. 9:12 a.m. Just after he left my house. They weren't just angry. They were mobilizing. My sister, who once cried when I spotted her cheating on a high school math test, now thought identity theft was fair play. I called the bank, placed a freeze, locked every account with biometric authentication, changed every password, even the ones I hadn't used in years. Then I pulled the deed from my safe. The family cabin, signed over to my name 2 years ago when Dad needed help avoiding foreclosure. He said, "It's still the family's, I just need your name on it for the mortgage." So I paid it off. $72,000 in silence. I never mentioned it again. Neither did he. Until now. Until the messages started coming in. "That cabin isn't really yours. You know that, right? You think you're better than us now? Don't forget where you came from." I hadn't. I came from a place where love was conditional, where silence was currency, where a little girl learned to smile through insults because that's just how your uncle jokes. No more. I scheduled a title transfer. Not to them, away from them. I put the cabin in a trust. Legal. Sealed. Irrevocable. No family member could touch it now, not even if I died. That afternoon I got a knock. Not at the door. At the window. It was my nephew. The same one who dumped soda in my lap. He stood in the yard, holding a handmade card. Crayon letters spelled out, "Sorry." But I didn't open the door. Because sometimes they send the child to clean the blood off a knife they all held. The card stayed on the porch for hours. Rain came mid-afternoon, curling the corners of his apology. By sunset, it was soggy pulp, a metaphor really. Because guilt means nothing when it's delivered by proxy. That night, I opened my laptop and checked the shared family calendar, something we'd all used for years. Birthdays, holidays, anniversaries. I noticed something strange. My name was gone. From everything. No more, Rowan brings dessert on Thanksgiving. No more, Rowan's half of cabin maintenance due. Even my birthday deleted. Erased, quietly and completely. I refreshed twice. It wasn't a glitch. They'd removed me. Digitally, symbolically, emotionally. But not legally. Because the trust still stood. And the cabin was still mine. And that loan, still frozen, pending reevaluation, thanks to my withdrawal. I knew what was coming. The money talks were about to turn into meetings. And soon after that, threats. So I beat them to it. I mailed certified letters to every name on the loan. My dad. My sister. Her husband. Each envelope included a notarized statement confirming my voluntary withdrawal, a copy of the trust holding the cabin, a letter from my lawyer stating that any further credit inquiries made in my name would result in legal action. No fluff. No warmth. Just ink and law. And then I did one last thing. I booked a cabin rental in the mountains, not our cabin. A new one. With soft flannel sheets and no ghosts in the walls. I needed distance. Not just miles, but meaning. I told no one where I went. Because when you grow up thinking silence keeps the peace, you forget that sometimes distance is the only true boundary. And I was finally learning how to draw one. The mountains were quiet, real quiet, the kind where you can hear your own pulse, and nothing demands your attention except the rhythm of trees and wind. I didn't bring much. Just a duffel bag, a few paperbacks, and my phone turned off. For 3 days, I remembered who I was before I became the fixer. Before family dinners turned into business meetings. Before trust was something they borrowed, not built. But peace has a short leash. On day 4, I got an email from the bank. Subject: Urgent Activity Alert. Someone had filed a complaint, claimed my loan withdrawal was fraudulent and retaliatory. They even attached a letter. Not from a lawyer. From my father. On letterhead, he printed himself. Full of emotional manipulation, calling me unstable, claiming the family was concerned for my mental state, and that my impulsive behavior was putting financial plans at risk. I stared at the screen. For a second, it worked. I felt that old guilt creep in. The voice they planted when I was 13 and told to keep the peace, because I was the quiet one. Then I remembered. They laughed when I was soaked in soda. They erased me from the calendar. They tried to steal from me, twice. I called my lawyer. Wes didn't miss a beat. Already drafting a response. We're adding a clause to your cabin trust. No family member may legally claim mental incompetence without court documentation. He paused. You okay? I looked outside. The sky was bruising toward sunset. My tea had gone cold beside me. I'm not broken, I said. I'm just done pretending they didn't try to break me. That night, I slept with the windows open. Because, for the first time in years, the only thing trying to get in was the wind. 2 weeks passed. No calls. No knocks. No new sabotage. Just silence, sharp and waiting. Then came the certified envelope. It wasn't from the bank. It was from my father's attorney. Inside, a letter claiming I'd committed intentional financial sabotage that caused reputational harm and emotional distress. They were exploring civil recourse if I didn't make things right. What did make things right mean? Apparently, it meant re-adding my name to the loan, granting limited family access to the cabin for holidays and events, publicly retracting my malicious legal interference. They were trying to rewrite my boundaries as betrayal. I sent the letter to Wes. He called me laughing. "This isn't a legal threat," he said. "It's a tantrum dressed in legal stationery. But tantrums can still rattle you." I sat with it for hours. Let the memories play like an old movie. Dad asking if I'd ever contribute emotionally, not just financially. My sister saying, "If you don't want to be part of the family, stop acting like it's a burden." My nephew's soda can hitting my lap, sticky and cold. No one had ever asked me how I'd survived all those years quietly paying. They only asked what I'd do once I stopped. So I answered. I drafted my own letter. It wasn't defensive. It was final. I cited every date, every document, every message. Attached copies of every transaction, showing not just absence of fraud, but proof of manipulation from their end. At the end, I wrote one sentence in bold. I owe you nothing legally, emotionally, or financially. I mailed it the next morning. Signature required. That same day, I saw they'd listed the cabin on Airbnb. But here's the twist. They forgot they didn't own it anymore. You said. I nearly laughed when I saw the listing. Photos of the cabin, my cabin on Airbnb. Polished wood floors, vintage quilts, a caption that read, "Family-owned rustic gem. Mountain views. Sleeps 6. I recognized the towels. I bought them. They hadn't even tried to hide it. They listed it under my sister's name. Used old photos, ones she must have taken back when she still had a key. There was a reservation pending. I could have called the platform, reported fraud, filed a claim, but instead I waited. Let the reservation go through. Let the guests arrive. And when they did, I had the caretaker, my hired property manager, greet them at the door with the truth. This property is not available. The listing was unauthorized. Full refunds are being processed. He handed them printed copies of the trust deed. Wes made sure of it. The guests left, confused but polite. But my sister? Not so much. She called me 20 minutes later, screaming through the speaker. "You humiliated me. Do you know how this looks?" I let her rant. Then I said, "It looks like you tried to profit off something you don't own." Click. She hung up. I emailed Airbnb that same night with documentation. The listing was removed in under 12 hours. They tried again 2 days later, this time under my brother-in-law's name. Same result. Every attempt they made only reinforced my case. Pattern of exploitation. Repeated, intentional misrepresentation. Undeniable paper trail. I wasn't just defending a property. I was building a fortress, one document at a time. And when the next envelope arrived, I knew what it was before I opened it. A court summons. They were suing me for alienation of familial property, which wasn't even a real thing. But their desperation was. The courtroom smelled like old paper and pride. They actually showed up with a lawyer, not a good one, just loud. He argued customary inheritance, emotional stake, and informal agreements made over family trust. But here's the thing about informal agreements. They dissolve under oath. Wes stood calmly, opened a folder. Page by page, he laid it bare. My sole ownership of the cabin, the notarized deed, the trust, irrevocable and sealed. The messages, digital proof of threats, manipulation, and property fraud. He didn't even need to raise his voice. My father stared ahead, jaw clenched. My sister kept blinking like the truth was dust in her eyes. My brother-in-law scribbled furiously on a pad with no ink. The judge took less than 10 minutes. Dismissed with prejudice. Translation? They couldn't sue again. Not for the cabin. Not for the loan. Not for anything. Outside the courthouse, I passed them in the hall. My sister muttered, "You've destroyed this family." I paused. Not angry. Not smug. Just done. "You destroyed it," I said. I just stopped pretending it was whole. They didn't reply. Didn't need to. Because some silences are acknowledgments. That evening, I returned to the real cabin. Mine. Lit the fireplace. Made tea in the mug Lila once painted for me. The trees stood tall outside, indifferent to drama. And I, for the first time in years, felt unclaimed. Not abandoned. Not estranged. Unclaimed. No more manipulation, disguised as tradition. No more financial strings tied to fake love. No more erasing myself to earn a seat at a table I built. I opened the window. Let the cold in. Let the truth breathe. And somewhere behind me, the kettle finally whistled. At my father's retirement dinner, he clinked his glass, raised it high, and said with that smug, politician-like smile he wore so well, "To my real children, the ones who made me proud." Everyone clapped. Cameras flashed. Champagne flowed. Then he turned, locked eyes with me like I was a stain on his perfect evening. "You can leave." That was it. No explanation. No shame. Just a death sentence spoken like a toast. I blinked. My body flushed hot, then cold. I stood, legs trembling, trying not to cry in front of my mother's pearls, my sister's Botoxed grin, my brother's gleaming wife. But then, my husband stood too. And what he did next, it silenced the room. My name is Leah. And from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Because have you ever stood in a room full of family and felt like an uninvited guest at your own funeral? My father used to call me his little legacy. He'd tell stories of how I read law books before bedtime, how I argued with the TV during political debates. But when I turned down Harvard to marry a man he said was beneath us, I became nothing. And tonight, he made it official. I watched my husband, calm, poised, reach into his blazer, and pull out the velvet blue folder I'd begged him not to bring. "Since you're making announcements, sir," he said, "let's make one more." He opened it. Inside, the deed. To the house. To the retirement fund. To the entire damn trust that I, not his precious other children, legally owned. Gasps. My brother dropped his fork. My sister's lips parted like a glitching doll. "This man you just kicked out your daughter for?" my husband said. "He's living in a house your daughter bought. Every bite of your dinner tonight was paid for with her work, her sacrifice, her loyalty." My father's smile cracked. And then my husband turned to me, gently pulled out my chair, and whispered, "You ready to go, Mrs. Blake?" I nodded. My heart was breaking. But this was the beginning of a reckoning. We didn't just walk out, we walked through fire. The room stayed frozen as we passed. My heels clicked on the marble floor like gunshots. My father stared, mouth slightly open, as if his retirement roast had turned into a courtroom and he'd just lost the case. Outside, the night air felt like freedom, cool, sharp, real. But inside me, a storm. I wanted to scream, to cry, to smash that champagne bottle over his fake mahogany table. Instead, I gripped my husband's hand. "Did I go too far?" he asked softly. I looked at him. My man, the only one in that room who never needed me to be perfect to love me. "No," I whispered. "You didn't go far enough." Because this wasn't just about one night. This was about every time he told people I was the disappointment. Every time he praised my siblings' store-bought successes while ignoring the empire I'd built from scratch. Every time he called me dramatic when I needed help. Every time I walked into a room and became wallpaper. I wasn't going to be silent anymore. Back at home, I opened my laptop. All the documents were ready. I'd been preparing for months. Bank transfers, title changes, scheduled revocations, everything tied to my name, retirement homes, fund management, business shares. I had the power to pull it all. You see, what my father didn't realize was this. While he bragged about my siblings' jobs at law firms, I owned one. While he mocked my soft career, I was flipping companies in silence, writing checks that paid his bills. And I was done doing it quietly. I pressed send. Just one button. And like dominoes, the lights would start going out in his world. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I wanted clarity. He needed to see what it was like to be erased. The next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop. Texts from my mother. Missed calls from my brother. Emails titled "Please" and "Emergency." But the best one? A voicemail from my father. "Leah, what have you done? Call me. We need to talk." And just like that, the silence I'd been forced into for years was now his. I didn't call him back. Instead, I sat in my home office, the one no one in my family had ever seen, lit by the soft morning sun, and played his voicemail on loop. Leah, what have you done? Call me. We need to talk. Suddenly, he needed me. The same man who told me to leave in front of 50 guests like I was the help. I stared at the pause screen on my laptop. The trust transfer documents. The board member removal notices. The corporate filings that tied his financial lifeline to mine. I thought I'd feel guilty, but all I felt was peace. Until my phone rang again. It was my mother. I didn't answer. She texted. He's having chest pains. He's not well. Be the bigger person. Be the bigger person? Where was that advice when I cried on the bathroom floor after he told me marrying Aaron would ruin my pedigree? Where was that empathy when I offered him business help, and he laughed in my face because I didn't wear a suit and tie? Where was that grace when I asked him, just once, to say he was proud of me? That night, there was a knock at our gate. It was my sister, still in her cocktail dress from the dinner. Makeup smudged. Hair tangled. I watched her through the camera feed. She was pacing, talking to herself, clutching her phone like it might save her. I pressed the intercom. Yes. Leah, please. Let me in. What do you want? I didn't know. I didn't know it was your money. That it was all yours. Dad said he told us you didn't have anything. He said you were a lost cause. I bit my lip, staring at the monitor. Funny, I said. He always told me you were the future of the family. Silence. Then she whispered, we're losing the house, Leah. I wanted to laugh. Or cry. Or maybe both. Because now they were finally feeling it. The loss. The weight. The unraveling. I buzzed the gate open. Not out of kindness, but because I wanted her to see what real power looked like up close. She stepped in slowly. Timid. Like I might attack her. I didn't. I simply said, you've been in his shadow your whole life. I built my own son. She sat on the edge of our velvet couch, like it might bite her. Gone was the smug, eye-rolling sister who once told me I'd wasted my brains on a man. Gone was the woman who paraded around our father's praise like a tiara. In her place was a girl, scared, cracked open, and suddenly small. Dad's having meetings, she said, voice shaking. He's trying to fix it. But everything's locked. The accounts. The assets. Even his condo's under review. He said you froze the holding company? I sipped my tea slowly. Not froze. Just redirected. Legally. My name was on everything, remember? He just never bothered to read the fine print. She blinked, stunned. I leaned in. You know the trust fund you used to shop at Saks every summer? That was me. The education account that paid for your grad school? Me. The corporate vehicle that let Dad buy that ridiculous boat. I tapped my chest. All. Me. She was quiet for a long time. Then, why didn't you ever say anything? I laughed softly. Would you have listened? Would he? The truth was, I stayed silent out of survival. I wanted love, not leverage. I thought if I gave enough, one day he'd look at me like I was enough. But betrayal teaches you to stop asking for crumbs and start baking your own damn bread. She looked down at her hands. I think he's scared. I've never seen him like this. Good, I said coldly. Let him sit in it. She looked up. Do you hate us? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I walked to the bookshelf and pulled down the framed photo of us. Me, her, and our brother. Taken when I was 13. I was in the middle, grinning, arms wrapped around them. We were kids, I said. But somewhere along the way, I became the enemy. She stood slowly, eyes wet. I was jealous of you, she admitted. You were always so sure of yourself. That hit me, because I was never sure. I was just loud enough to hide the breaking. She moved toward the door. I'm sorry, Leah. I didn't stop her. Not yet. Because this wasn't about apologies. It was about consequence. And tomorrow? It was my brother's turn to come knocking. He didn't knock. He barged in. Literally shoved the front door open like he owned the place, forgetting, of course, that I bought it. Leah, what the hell are you doing? No hello. No apology. Just rage dressed in entitlement. He stormed into the living room, eyes wild, suit wrinkled, like he hadn't slept. I stayed seated. Aaron stood behind me, arms crossed, silent, my shield without needing to say a word. You humiliated Dad, my brother snapped. He's not eating. He's not sleeping. He's paranoid you're trying to destroy him. I tilted my head. I'm not trying, I said calmly. I already did. He flinched, like he never expected me to admit it. You've always been cold, he hissed. Calculating. Dad said you were dangerous, and he was right. No, I said. What's dangerous is watching your family pretend you don't exist, and still funding their lives out of guilt. He scoffed. You want us to suffer? I stood, and I walked right up to him. I want you to remember, I said. Remember when I called you crying after Dad disowned me for marrying Aaron, and you told me to grow up? He looked away. Remember when I asked you to co-sign on Mom's hospital bill because Dad wouldn't, and you told me she wasn't your responsibility? He stayed quiet. Remember when I graduated early, and nobody showed up? When I opened my own firm, and not a single one of you said, congratulations? Still nothing. Tell me again, I said, voice sharp now. Who made who suffer? He dropped onto the armchair, like his legs gave out. You're really cutting us off, he whispered. Completely. I nodded. I gave you 15 years, I said. 15 years of paying bills, cleaning up messes, and begging for basic love in return. You gave me silence. He rubbed his face with both hands. What do we do now? I smiled faintly. Try living without me the way you pretended to for years. He looked up, eyes red now. You're serious. As death, I said. And for once, I saw it on his face, that flicker of realization that I wasn't just the sister in the background anymore. I was the reckoning, the one they raised to be silent, who chose to roar instead. They thought I was finished, but I hadn't even started. The next morning, my father's name hit the press. Front page headline on a business blog that used to worship him. Patterson legacy unravels. Family empire quietly built on daughter's fortune. The article didn't come from me, but I knew where the leak came from. People talk when their accounts freeze. When their private schools start sending warning emails. When their Amex cards decline at steakhouse dinners. My inbox lit up. Attorneys, board members, former colleagues. Most were in disbelief. Some tried to sympathize. A few congratulated me. But one email stopped me cold. Subject, I always knew. From my godmother, the only one in the family who ever truly saw me. You did what I always prayed you would. You didn't let their love define your worth. You built yourself in their absence. And now you're walking through them like fire. I'm proud of you, baby. I read it 3 times before I cried. Not out of sadness, but because for once someone said it, they were proud. Later that day, I got a call from the firm that managed our family's real estate holdings. The managing partner's voice was tight. Ms. Blake, your father's trying to liquidate assets that are under your authority. And we need direction. Do we proceed? I leaned back in my chair, the power palpable on my skin. Deny the liquidation, I said, and issue an audit on every transaction made in the last 5 years. If anything looks suspicious, flag it for federal review. Silence. Then a quiet understood. It was surgical now. I wasn't just cutting them off. I was dismantling the illusion they built without me. And yet, that night, I stood by my window, watching the lights of the city pulse below, and whispered a question only the dark could hear. Why did I have to burn it all to the ground just to be seen? Aaron came up behind me, wrapped his arms around my waist. You okay? He asked. I nodded, but my voice cracked anyway. I shouldn't have had to do this to prove I mattered. He pressed his forehead against mine. You didn't have to prove anything. They just couldn't handle your light. I closed my eyes and decided I wasn't done yet, because they hadn't said sorry. Not truly, but they would. Soon. The formal invitation came in a thick cream envelope, expensive, old-fashioned, like everything my father valued. Inside, emergency family meeting. Saturday, 6 p.m., Patterson Estate. No please. No signature. Just expectation. Aaron raised an eyebrow. You going? I smiled. Oh, I'm not just going. I'm bringing the terms. Saturday arrived like a court date. I wore black, sleek, powerful, merciless. My hair pinned up. No jewelry. Just presents. When I walked into that house, my house, though they didn't know it yet, the air shifted. My mother stood first. Then my father. Then my brother and sister, quiet in the corner. All four of them looked like ghosts trying to rehearse humanity. Leah, my father said. Voice dry. Eyes smaller somehow. Dad. He gestured to the dining table. Let's talk. I didn't sit. I stayed standing. You want to talk? I said. Let's make this efficient. I placed a folder on the table. Inside, a list. Every asset I'd removed. Every trust I'd restructured. Every LLC I'd absorbed. Signed, stamped, notarized. Their silence roared louder than any insult they ever threw at me. Why, my mother finally whispered. We're your family. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was insulting. Family doesn't cut you out in public. Family doesn't feed off you and pretend you're irrelevant. Family doesn't humiliate you at a dinner they used your money to host. My sister sobbed quietly. My brother's fists clenched. My father sat down, deflated. What do you want, Leah? He asked, not in anger, but defeat. I walked to the head of the table, his chair, and I sat. What I want, I said slowly, is for you to listen. And for the first time in my life, they did. I told them about the nights I cried myself to sleep after they mocked my choices, about the weight of carrying them in silence, about the bitterness of building wealth only to be branded a failure. I ended with this. I loved you all more than I ever loved myself.
And you used it.
But I've learned something. Love without respect is just self-harm. Silence. Then my father whispered. I didn't know. I thought I was protecting the family. You weren't, I said. You were protecting your ego. He nodded slowly. You were the strongest one all along. Finally, he saw me. But it was too late for reconciliation. Because this wasn't a plea for love. It was a declaration of sovereignty. The following week, I closed the final account with a click. The last shared holding. The last financial thread tying me to them. It was done. My attorney called. It's official, Leah. Everything's in your name now. They've signed. It's over. Over?
No.
It had just begun. Because the old version of me, the quiet one, the giver, the daughter who begged for crumbs, she was dead. In her place stood a woman who burned her bridges and used the ash to build her throne. That Saturday, Aaron and I hosted a charity gala. Not in secret, not in spite, but in full light. I wore white. My name was on the banner, the check, the foundation. And as I stepped onto that stage to speak, hundreds of eyes on me, I thought of that retirement dinner. That moment he told me to leave like I was nothing. Now I was the one raising a glass. To all the women who were told to shrink, to be quiet, to disappear. I hope you know, your silence is not your debt. Applause thundered. Aaron smiled proudly from the front row. After the event, as we walked to the car, I spotted a familiar silhouette by the fountain. My father, alone.
He looked smaller now.
Not physically, but spiritually, like something in him had finally cracked. Leah, he said. I stopped, inches away.
Come.
Steady. I came to say, he swallowed. I was wrong. About everything.
About you.
For a second, the child in me stirred. The one who still wanted his love. But I didn't come here to collect approval. I came to finish the story. I know, I said. But I don't need your apology. He blinked, caught off guard. I just needed to stop apologizing to myself. And I walked away. Not angry. Not broken.
Free.
Because sometimes revenge isn't about destruction. It's about revelation. making them see the version of you they tried to erase standing tall, thriving, and untouchable. She snatched the iPhone out of Lily's hand and slammed its screen first into the marble cake. The room fell silent, frosting, shattered glass, and gasps frozen mid-laugh. My daughter's sweet 16 died right there in that bakery-rented room, under pink streamers and cheap disco lights. My name is Rachel Monroe, and from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Have you ever looked at your own family and wondered if they were secretly rooting against you? My sister, Vanessa, stood there, smug, righteous, a glass of rose in one hand, a fake apology forming behind her teeth. Lily's face crumpled, silent, too stunned to cry. I stepped forward, fists clenched, but my mother's shrill voice pierced through the tension. Rachel, don't escalate. Escalate? 10 minutes later, 2 cops walked in. Not for Vanessa. For Lily. Disorderly conduct, the officer muttered, as if we were in a bar fight. Not a birthday. Vanessa, ever the drama queen, sobbed on cue. She told them my daughter attacked her over a simple misunderstanding. I stood in front of Lily, shielding her, but then my father handed over a signed witness statement. So did my mother. They'd backed her story. They let my daughter get cuffed. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I did one thing. I walked over to Lily as they read her rights, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "Don't worry, baby. I promise you they're gonna pay." The officer hesitated. Maybe something in my voice chilled him. They took her away anyway. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the family portrait above the fireplace, the same one we took at Vanessa's wedding. I remembered how Lily was the flower girl. I remembered how I paid for half that wedding. I remembered everything. In the morning, I filed for temporary emancipation for Lily. I used every legal thread I had from my old paralegal days. But that was just the beginning. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to post. I was going to destroy every lie they ever built from the inside. And 3 months later, my mother couldn't sleep. My father was vomiting in the church parking lot, and my sister was knee-deep in coffee grounds sorting trash in a county jumpsuit. But we're not there yet. This isn't about revenge. It's about making truth undeniable, one broken lie at a time. 3 days after the arrest, Lily's charges were dropped, quietly. No apology. No correction. Just dropped. But her name still sat in the juvenile system, like a bruise that wouldn't fade. She'd stopped speaking. Barely ate. And every time the doorbell rang, her shoulders flinched. I knew I couldn't fix it with hugs. Not this. I needed something bigger, surgical, permanent. I started with the police report. My sister's version had been signed by both my parents. They claimed Lily had thrown the phone and lunged. I requested the venue's security footage through a lawyer friend. Turns out the camera caught everything. The smash, Vanessa's smirk, and Lily's stunned silence. No lunge. No throw. Just a 16-year-old girl watching her life fracture in real time. I made 4 copies. 1 went into a safe deposit box. 1 to my lawyer. 1 to Lily's school counselor because my daughter didn't need rumors shadowing her college dreams. And the last one? That went to Vanessa's job. See, she worked as a youth behavioral therapist. Yes, therapist. And I knew her office. Knew her boss. Knew her boss's boss, who once flirted with me shamelessly at a fundraiser. I scheduled a meeting, shared the footage, then leaned in and said, "If she can lie this easily about a child, imagine what else she's capable of." Her boss didn't blink. He just nodded, grim, slow, like a man watching a building tilt before the collapse. She was put on immediate suspension. Vanessa exploded, of course. Called my phone 32 times in one night. Left voice messages like, "You vindictive psycho," and "You're ruining my life over a phone?" No, Vanessa. Not over a phone. Over my daughter. But the best part was this. The voicemail she left, the one where she admitted, "I didn't think it'd go this far. I was just trying to scare her," was recorded automatically. Guess who I sent that to? Yep. Her employer. And the detective handling the original case. Meanwhile, my parents? Silent. But their guilt was starting to rot them. I could smell it in their hesitation, in the just checking in texts, in the flowers they left on my porch like cowards' confessions. Too late. They picked their side. And I was just getting started. Some lies bruise. Others bleed when you pull them out slow. It was my father who cracked first. He showed up on my porch in a worn jacket that still smelled like his garage. The same man who'd signed that report like he was approving a damn grocery list now stood with a tremble in his lip, holding a box of apple fritters like a peace offering.
I didn't invite him in.
He looked past me, hoping to catch a glimpse of Lily. She here? I didn't answer.
He set the box down like it meant something.
We didn't know it would go that far. We thought. You thought siding with Vanessa would keep the peace, I said. But peace built on betrayal isn't peace. It's rot. He looked like I'd punched him. I'll testify, he whispered. I'll tell them she made us lie. Your mother was scared. She was silent. I said, silence is a choice. And I shut the door. But he'd already given me something, confirmation that the report was coerced. I took that to my lawyer, and together, we drafted a formal request to the DA's office to reopen the investigation, this time with new evidence, the surveillance footage, Vanessa's voicemail, and now my father's confession. But I didn't stop there. I dug deeper. I found out Vanessa had been using our parents' address for tax purposes, despite living in a high-rise condo across town.
Fraud.
I printed it all. Receipts.
Statements.
Even a Christmas card she'd accidentally sent to her real address. Meanwhile, I enrolled Lily in therapy. A new school, too. Somewhere her name didn't echo in the hallways. I sold my engagement ring, the one I'd kept in a box for 8 years like a stupid souvenir of pain, and used the money to pay for everything up front. Every time Vanessa's world cracked, Lily smiled a little more. But poetic justice isn't poetry without rhythm. So, I timed my next move perfectly. The day before Vanessa's reinstatement hearing at work, her boss received a full anonymous package, detailed evidence of tax fraud, and the real story of what happened to Lily. I made sure it arrived with a timestamp, a paper trail, unignorable. By sunset, Vanessa's hearing was canceled. Her job, terminated. No severance. And my favorite part? The silence. No calls.
No threats.
Just silence. Revenge doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, and lets the silence choke them slowly. The first time Vanessa called me after losing her job, she didn't scream.
She begged.
Her voice was hoarse, like she'd already spent hours screaming into pillows or empty wine bottles. Rachel, she rasped, I know I went too far, but you're destroying my life. I didn't say a word, just let the silence sit. She filled it like a coward always does. It was just supposed to scare her. Lily was always spoiled. You let her act like a little queen. That was it. That was her reason. I hung up. Later that week, I found out Vanessa had moved back in with our parents. The condo?
Gone.
Leased out to cover legal debts. She tried applying at 3 different clinics. I'd sent a dossier to all of them, no lies, just facts. The kind of facts that made people rethink handing a title to a woman who crushed a teenager's birthday and called it therapy. But the best part wasn't her unemployment. It was what came next, because truth has momentum. And now it was crashing down the family tree. My father's church board found out about the false report he signed, thanks to an anonymous packet dropped in their suggestion box. It included the footage, the signed statement, a note. Is this who you want speaking for your community? By Sunday, his name was quietly removed from the website. His role as deacon suspended pending review. My mother cried in the pews while the sermon went on like nothing had happened. And Lily? She painted again. She filled canvas after canvas with wild reds and violent streaks of cobalt, said she felt like her insides were finally moving again. Her therapist said the anger was turning into expression. Good. Anger is holy when it moves. I watched as Lily laughed in the kitchen one night, eating cereal at 1 a.m., feet tapping to some awful TikTok song. I hadn't seen her that light in months. And it hit me, this wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was reclamation. Piece by piece, I was taking our piece back from the people who sold it like cheap furniture. And they were cracking under the weight of their own guilt. You don't need to set fire to a house to watch it collapse. Sometimes all you do is pull out one nail at a time. They showed up together this time, my mother and Vanessa, like two ghosts pretending to still be flesh. I was repotting Lily's succulents on the porch when they pulled up. Vanessa wore sunglasses too big for her face. My mother clutched a handbag like it held dignity instead of receipts. "We just want to talk," my mother said, stepping forward. "No," I said calmly, brushing dirt from my palms. "You want relief. But that's not the same." Vanessa took off her glasses. Her eyes were bloodshot. "I lost everything, Rachel. My job, my license." "You lost your mask," I cut in. "There's a difference." She tried again. "I'm family," I stood. "So is Lily. And you tried to get her arrested." The silence that followed stretched thin and sharp. My mother opened her mouth like she wanted to play the peacemaker, but I wasn't interested in fiction anymore. "I dropped out of my therapy program," Vanessa mumbled. "Can't get hired anywhere. I'm applying to work at a recycling plant downtown. They pay by the hour. I sort garbage." I looked at her, finally. Her nails were bitten down. She couldn't meet my eyes. "Sounds honest," I said. "Maybe the most honest thing you've ever done." That stung. She winced. "I was jealous," she said suddenly, almost involuntarily, "of how much you loved her, of how close you two were." There it was, the black root beneath every cut. "She got the love I always wanted from you," Vanessa whispered to our mother. "And you gave it to Rachel instead." My mother blinked like someone seeing smoke where there should have been air. I didn't say anything. Just watched them unravel in real time. Guilt is a strange thing. It doesn't rot in the dark. It blossoms. Louder. Uglier. Until even liars can't outrun the noise. They left without another word. Later that night, I got a message on Facebook. A girl named Marissa, mid-20s, said she'd once had Vanessa as a youth therapist.
Said she wanted to share some things.
She used the words inappropriate conversations and gaslighting. My breath caught. This wasn't just about Lily anymore.
It was a pattern.
And Vanessa wasn't just my problem. She was a risk. The revenge I started for my daughter was now turning into something bigger. Not just justice. Protection. From a woman who'd worn sisterhood like a costume and used it to tear lives apart. Marissa met me at a coffee shop off 9th and Green, a quiet spot with humming fridges and employees too bored to eavesdrop. She wore a navy hoodie and kept checking the door like trauma might walk in behind her. "I was 13 when I met Vanessa," she said, fingers clenched around a chipped ceramic mug. "She was my court-appointed therapist after my foster mom got arrested." She took a long breath. At first she was nice. Too nice. Bought me snacks. Let me skip sessions if I needed a break. But then she started saying weird things like my foster dad probably hated me, or that I was too sensitive to survive in real life. She'd talk about her own childhood, twist the story until I felt guilty for complaining. I listened. I didn't blink, because what she described wasn't therapy. It was conditioning. "I tried reporting her once," Marissa continued. "Told the county rep that Vanessa made me feel unsafe. But they said she was highly recommended, that I was just being reactive. After that, she'd bring it up constantly. Called me a manipulator. Said no one would ever believe me again." I felt a coldness spread in my chest, not rage. Precision. I asked Marissa if she'd be willing to write a statement. She nodded slowly. "If it helps anyone else, yeah." By the end of the week, I had 3 more stories. Former teens, now adults, all willing to talk. Some had been silenced. Some gaslit. One even claimed Vanessa encouraged her to take the blame for something her stepbrother did, to keep the family peace. Same manipulation. Same venom. Different lives. I compiled it all into a dossier. Dates, names, transcripts, copies of therapy notes one girl still had in a drawer like burned letters. Then I sent it directly to the state licensing board. They opened a formal investigation within 72 hours. And just like that, Vanessa's world, already a crumbling tower, lost its last support beam. She was officially barred from practicing. Indefinitely. But that wasn't the part that gutted her. It was when the stories went public. I didn't leak them. I didn't have to. One of the girls posted on TikTok. Her video went viral. Vanessa Monroe told me I deserved the pain I was in. Over 200,000 views in 48 hours. Lily saw it. She looked at me with wide, quiet eyes. She hurt other girls? I nodded. My daughter didn't cry. She just said, good. Not out of cruelty. Out of recognition. Some people don't deserve silence. Some people need their monsters named out loud. I expected her to hide. But Vanessa didn't crawl away. She snapped. She showed up at Lily's school. Not to talk. Not to beg. To scream. Security footage showed her pacing in front of the entrance, shouting about slander, about how she was ruined by a vendetta, about me. She never got inside. The school resource officer intercepted her, but Lily saw it. She called me from the counselor's office, her voice steady but distant. She was shaking. Her mascara was everywhere. My hands clenched around the steering wheel so hard the leather cracked. I didn't drive to the school. I drove to the police station. And I filed for a restraining order on behalf of Lily. Within 24 hours, it was granted. Vanessa was legally forbidden from coming within 300 feet of my daughter. And this time, my mother was the one who called me. She's spiraling, she whispered.
She's not eating.
She said she's being followed online. Tell her to take it up with her victims, I replied. But she's your sister. No, I said. She used to be. The county reached out next. Turns out Vanessa had lied on multiple income disclosures tied to her former practice. She'd received over $8,000 in improper state reimbursements. They weren't just investigating now. They were charging her. Fraud. Misconduct.
Perjury.
And in the final twist of fate, Vanessa was offered a choice: plead out and do 6 months of community service plus repayment, or risk a full trial. She took the deal. So, 3 months after smashing Lily's iPhone and calling the cops on her, Vanessa Monroe was sorting garbage in a reflective vest behind the very courthouse that once processed my daughter's arrest. That's where I saw her. Lily and I were walking out of the building after a final hearing to seal her juvenile record permanently. She was free.
Clean.
Vanessa looked up and froze. Our eyes locked. And I didn't smirk. I didn't sneer. I just put my arm around my daughter and walked past her like she was exactly what she'd become. Unimportant. Because the truth was, this was never about revenge anymore. It was about correction. She tried to bury a child with lies. And the world made her dig her way back out, with trash bags and broken pride. Poetic, maybe. But the final chapter hadn't been written yet. Not until I gave my parents one last gift. A gift wrapped in truth. And signed in legal ink. I waited until Christmas Eve. The day our family used to gather, like we weren't splintered bones. When everyone dressed fake, smiled fake, and prayed over food they'd tear each other apart for later. This year there was no dinner. No tree. Just a knock at my parents' front door, and a thick white envelope sliding across their welcome mat. Inside, a formal notice. A civil suit. Filed by me, on behalf of Lily Monroe, minor turned victim, now represented with full legal standing. Charges: defamation, emotional distress, filing of a false police report. Defendants: Vanessa Monroe, Thomas Monroe, and Carol Monroe. That's right. I sued all three. They thought this was over. They thought community service and silent shame was the ending. But justice, real justice, doesn't whisper. It roars. The evidence was airtight. The security footage, the voicemails, the school counselor's report, my father's own confession, and Vanessa's unhinged visit to Lily's school, that sealed it. The best part? My attorney offered a deal. Withdraw the suit if my parents issued a public retraction of the report, a full apology to Lily, and agreed to financial restitution. $25,000 in damages for therapy, schooling, and emotional recovery. They refused. For 2 weeks. Then my father showed up at my door. His hands trembled as he held out a signed, notarized statement. My mother's name shakily printed beneath his own. I was wrong, he whispered. We both were. I didn't take the paper. Lily did. She stood in the doorway, taller now. Clearer. Stronger. She read every line. Then nodded. We accept. I never said a word.
Didn't need to.
The silence was loud enough. And Vanessa? She moved to a studio apartment an hour away.
No job.
No title. No audience. Her name now floats in Reddit threads and whispered DMs, a cautionary tale in teacher groups and youth therapy circles. She will never work with children again. As for Lily, she graduates next spring. Got into Emerson College with a personal essay titled, How My Mother Broke Generational Silence. She paints again. She laughs loud. She lives without fear. And me, I sleep.
Deep.
Unbothered. Because some stories aren't revenge. They're restoration. And some endings don't need exclamation marks. Just quiet, final truth.